Welcome again, everyone. I'm Meg Carney, the founding director of the Solstice Master of Fine Arts and Creative Writing program here at LaSalle University. Welcome to the fifth in a series of 8 readings taking place as part of our 2025 summer residency here in Auburndale, Massachusetts. This residency is 10 days and it is the kickoff of our fall semester. The graduating student reading is one of the highlights of the Solstice residency, as it's a showcase of the creative work of our students who have endeavored to grow as writers pretty much nonstop for the last 2 years. They will be reading from their creative theses, which today represent 2 of our 5 genre concentrations, fiction and poetry. You'll find within these 2 genres, our soon-to-be graduates have developed their own voices, their own approaches to their craft and their subject matter. Each will read for 15 minutes as part of the fulfillment of their graduation requirements. Grads, you're going to be introduced by faculty members, but I was, of course, on the admissions team committee who reviewed all of your applications when you came in, and I'm so excited to see what you've done over the last couple of years and hear all that growth of your new work. So first up, we will have fiction student Beth Zimmer, who will be introduced by faculty member Sandra Schofield. Next, we'll have graduating poetry student Bob Whelan. He will be introduced by faculty at large Jose Angel Aragus by way of a pre-recorded video introduction. Then we will have graduating fiction student Jessamin McSwain introduced by Jennifer Mervin. Next, we will have graduate fiction student Jill Sullivan Kane introduced by faculty member Laura Williams McCaffrey. And we will conclude with graduating poetry student Erik Armstrong, who will be introduced by faculty member Ian Haley Pollock, again by way of a pre-recorded video. We just love this modern technology that lets other faculty introduce students they admire and love in this kind of 21st century way. So Sandra, come on up to the mic.
Thank you. Is that right? I'd like to ask Beth to come on first. Beth is one of the people that I know to see, I've laughed with, I've sat beside, but I haven't worked with. And I'm so delighted to wish her well today. And I have some questions for her. I want to know, what is your first goal post MFA?
Keep writing. And don't take too many breaks.
That's pretty good. Can you name a writer or 2 that you feel you take with you from having studied that will help to guide you?
Oh my God. I
Someone
hate that
you love.
question.
You do?
I do, because I love everything that I read.
That's pretty good.
It is. It's very hard.
Can you name one?
I am drawing a complete blank.
That's all right. That's all right. We all get into that because it's like a stew instead of a clear broth. There's so much that you've learned. Can you say something about what you're going to read, from how long it took to write it, or where you will submit it, or how it propels you to the next thing you're going to do?
So the thing today, so I'm working on a novel, and I'd like to finish it, like push to the very end, see where it goes. I found that I used to be a planner, and I'm open to the idea of seeing where it'll go. And I've seen characters come into my work, and then I had to go back and add them back in, which has been quite eye-opening for me. Yeah, it
All
was very
right.
hard for me. to let
So
that happen.
what I see here is a fellow fool who is taking on one of the great challenges, not just because it's big, but well, because it's long.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can't wait to hear part of it. So I give you Beth Zimmer.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. So as I just said, I'm going to read from a chapter. It's about midway through part 1 of Small Town Lies, my novel in progress. Ruby McCallahan is the protagonist, and she has been living in a small town on Lake Michigan for the past 20 years under an assumed name, Grace Callahan. Allison is a mother figure to her, and Lucas Barnes is a professor from Chicago on vacation and renting a nearby cabin with his daughter, Samantha. He is currently on sabbatical and working on a book about the Chicago Museum of Natural History, and he is looking for Ruby McCallahan. This reading takes place after a scene in which Grace had a panic attack. And it's mostly a self-reflective piece. And some of you might remember parts of it from other readings. And the middle was shortened for time constraints. So Grace, July 7th, 2007. Grace woke tired and restless. But instead of panic or fear, an eerie sense of calm enveloped her, like a dense fog when it moves in across the water, heavy and still. In the haze, she let her mind wander to the previous day, moments before the panic attack. Lucas was treading on Grace's home turf and completely unaware, oblivious to the emotions he was stirring up. The museum was her story, the place where she grew up, the place she knew by heart. She could visualize each and every room with such clarity and precision, like the precision needed to cut and grind the facets of the most precious diamonds in the world, a lapidary's proficiency, her father's expertise. Lucas talked about the museum's basement, and the smell of its musty odor permeated her whole being. She had rummaged through the same cabinets with Claudia in the very same room. Looking back, she should have known it would all be short-lived. She should have stayed in the basement, in the room with the bird skins, lost in their colors, surrounded by the mystery of their deaths. She envied the girl she had once been in those brief, precious years before the gems went missing, before her father was accused of stealing them. Many times over the years, she had thought of those delicate bird skins, fragile in her hands, of Claudia's pen scratching softly, making notes, the careful diligence of science, straightforward and attentive. The morning was cool and a crisp breeze blew off the lake. Grace climbed out of bed, made some coffee, and built a fire to help soothe her nerves. The fire crackled and threw out a warmth she didn't feel. Past became present, present mixed with past, and time itself was confused. She felt a chill course through her and thought about the constant badgering of investigators, covert reporters waiting around corners, following her and calling at all hours of the night. They accused her of knowing something, of covering up for her father, and looked for anything they could use, something to twist in their favor, to sell their newspapers. She wasn't a girl anymore, but she knew she'd never be able to handle that level of insanity again. Yesterday, Lucas was talking about his book in the museum, and it reminded her of her father, pleasant, happy memories. Then it struck her like the lightning from the previous day's storm. One minute, she was sitting next to Lucas, thinking about her father, and the next minute, barely able to breathe. She had remembered that Lucas was looking for Ruby McCallahan. He was looking for her. For a brief moment, she had forgotten. Grace looked away from the fire. Almost every aspect of the cabin had changed since her father had first purchased it back in 1980. It had come fully furnished with a hodgepodge of dishes, pots, and pans. A broken lounge chair had sat in front of the large picture window, and tucked in the back corner were 2 hideously ugly, ornate chairs. Her father said they must have come straight out of a theater production, the stage set for a vampire lair, he teased. Her favorite memory was the old orange couch which sat in the center of the room. When they arrived at the cabin every weekend, the first thing her father would do was throw a ratty old bedsheet over the top to keep the sand out and save their skin from the scratchy burlap, he'd say. Although she hated that couch, it was the last thing she got rid of. Everything in the cabin had changed. The furniture, the appliances, even the flooring. but the property and the shell of the house looked exactly as it did the first day she and her father arrived. How had she not changed a single thing in all these years? She let her mind wander to the real question that was looming, the one that caused the panic attack. Why was Lucas looking for her? She tried to convince herself there must be a logical reason, but she kept circling back to her father and the stolen gems. Something about hearing her name in this context after so many years sparked something in her. And then an idea formed. What if Lucas had found something that would exonerate her father? This was possible. She knew her father. There was no reason for him to steal raw, uncut rubies and sapphires. He already had some in his private collection. It never made any sense. The desire to know what happened took over and possessed her. Oh, she had speculated about the gems before, but never like this. At the time, Dr. Hahn from the museum and Andrew Spellman from Tiffany's were at the top of her list. They were mad because her father went behind their backs and took control of the Tiffany exhibit. Grace even went as crazy as to suspect Claudia, and Gail too. But after all these years, Lucas showed up with new information. At least that was what she hoped. She wondered what Allison would think. Grace had tried talking to her about the stolen gems after her father had died, but she never wanted to talk about it and kept avoiding the conversation. To Allison, it was as if the story of the gems had died along with her father's death. Grace found Allison where she expected her to be on a Monday morning, starting a tour at the Historical Society. Allison's great-grandparents were original founding members of Five Lakes, and she lived and breathed the stories of the town's history. Grace slipped in quietly at the back to watch. Allison was a natural-born storyteller. She had special way with the tourists and regaled them with historical facts and embellished stories. Her tours always began with this town's humble beginnings, and Grace listened to stories about the rugged lumberjacks who cut down towering white pines, about the trading posts and early businesses that popped up and assembled around the camp, and about the origin of the town's name. 5 Lakes is not the number of lakes as most people assume, she said. More likely, the name is derived from an Anishinaabe word referencing the 5 water structures in the area. Allison liked to hold up a finger as she stated each of the 5 parts, starting with the marsh on the southeastern side of Trout Lake and ending with Michigani, or Lake Michigan. The tour turned to pirates, and Allison told fanciful stories of 5 Lakes' most famous pirates. She coaxed the children closer to get a better glimpse of a picture of Roaring Dan Seavey standing on the prow of a stolen ship, his ugly teeth bared in glory. Unfortunately, Allison said, looking down at the children, there are very few stories of buried treasure along the shores of Lake Michigan, but you never know what you might find if you keep your eyes open. And she pointed to the display case holding some gold coins and other pieces of jewelry found along their local shores. But the real treasure in 5 Lakes, she said to the group, is the town and its people. After the tour, Grace and Allison walked comfortably in silence. The town's historic district was filled with Victorian Queen Anne homes and summer cottages, marked with oval plaques commemorating the dates of their construction. The houses were packed closely together and separated by beautifully manicured lawns and gardens. Allison's home was in one of 5 Lakes' unique cottages, complete with gables, vestibules, and small front and back porches. Grace headed straight to her favorite room, the screened-in porch in the backyard. An overhead fan swirled the air, and scents of roses, sweet alyssum, and lemon verbena floated in from the garden. Every time Grace visited, the thought of adding a porch to her own cabin crossed her mind. Maybe it was finally time she made a change. Allison set down 2 iced teas and interrupted her thoughts. Well, she said, and she sat back in her chair and took a long, slow drink of iced tea. For someone who talked all the time, Allison was good at waiting. She had this way of pulling stuff out of Grace ever since she was a little girl. Grace wasn't even sure what Allison was asking. Eventually, Grace surrendered. They both knew it was inevitable. Charles was good the other night, Grace said. The way Charles simply rolled out the fact Ruby was gone was pure genius. It was true. Ruby was gone. She considered herself Grace now. It feels odd in a way, thinking about my name after so many years. It's not like I don't think of myself as Ruby. It's just that I feel detached from the name. Ruby is a name I associate with the past, back when my father is alive. I was Ruby as a child. Now I'm simply Grace. Allison nodded. It was clear she understood. She probably thought about Grace the same way. I talked to Lucas, said Grace. Actually, I talked to him twice since Rose's party. Allison looked surprised. Lucas and Sam got caught in the storm the other day, and I let them in until it passed. Sam told me how her mother died in a car accident, and then I ran into them again the following morning. I walked with them for a while. I was hoping to see a piping plover on the beach. I wanted to show one to Sam. The significance of the male birds taking care of their young was not lost on Allison. She had shared the story when she was just a girl. Finally, Grace told Allison how Lucas talked about his book in the museum. The vivid details of the museum brought back a flood of emotions. I haven't really talked to anyone about the museum, or haven't heard anyone talk about the museum like that in a long time. Thoughts about my father, about working with Claudia, the investigation, everything came rushing back. The panic attack came out of nowhere. But I'm okay now. It's weird. I want to know why Lucas is looking for me. What do you think? Allison didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, she responded, "Are you sure, Ruby? I think we should take time to think about this carefully. We just don't know what Lucas's motivation is. This could bring it all back. Reporters, police." Grace was surprised. Allison just called her Ruby and didn't seem to realize it. "But we won't know unless we ask him." "Have you ever wondered what happened to the stolen gems?" asked Grace. "Personally, I was happy when the investigation stopped," said Allison. "I can't see any reason to bring it up again. What good could come of it?" Grace knew the decision to reveal herself to Lucas would affect Allison too. She felt the earth shift again, one more tilt. Her horoscope had said something about needing to work on straightening out crossed wires. Allison hadn't called Grace Ruby in years, and now the name flowed out of her mouth as easy as breathing. Wires were far from getting straightened. They were getting tangled and twisted, forming tight, constricted knots. Yet something felt right hearing the name Ruby again. "Something feels different this time," Grace said. "I don't think Lucas is like the others." She couldn't explain it. She felt herself being drawn in and curious. She wanted to know what happened to the gems and why everyone thought her father took them. Grace felt herself being pulled in different directions, but for the first time in a long time, she felt something reminiscent of hope.
I think I should quit now.
Make sure this is.
Can I make sure there it is. I want to thank Meg for that and tons of other things, her patience and forgiveness of me and Q, and for my mentors and for everyone in Solstice, and a shout out to my poetry squad. Okay. They're highly supportive and they never carry knives. Unless they're carving good poems. So I'm going to read from Family Secrets, which is an intergenerational poem that covers ups and downs and kind of like the fallout from trauma. So I don't necessarily feel like I need a trigger warning, but there will be some mentions of it. I'll start with the prologue. How do we tell our children about the inexorable imperfections, faults, and inconsistencies with words that don't feel like sharp sleet against the skin? How do we explain the baggage we carry from our own childhood without sounding shallow or pitiful? How do you explain that you were once a child hit with clenched fist, left damaged, so emotionally handicapped that now you're going to have to leave you and their mother because that's just how it works? Or is that a rationale for selfishness? Can you explain that it is possible to have compassion and hunger at the same time? That doves and hawks are both beautiful and necessary? Or is that just a lie we tell ourselves, trying to find a way to avoid the responsibility of the necessary work of family? Is it possible for one generation to absorb a history of hurt and not pass it on? What do you say from the shadows of another room where you're always seeking penance? Swimming lessons. My father sailed away, leaving me as my mother's lifeboat. Neither she nor I could float, so we accepted drowning. She out of despair, me not knowing anything different. Anger was my father's life jacket. I could not have known his father had drowned in alcohol, as had my mother's father. So I learned to swim alone because the clinging grasp of another could sink you down too. But it's not all trauma. Good things can be inherited, and this one is called peepers. We drive down Nugent Stretch between Rockport and Gloucester near the yellow diamond sign that says vernal pools. Father with a daughter, slowing her car to a crawl, pulling over on the dirt shoulder, windows open. We just sit and listen. The song of peepers gush into the night. A favorite sound, only heard for a few nights in springtime. This delicious moment to savor a feast for our ears, and then I think of a time becoming to be when you are with your child who happens upon peepers, and you remember. Here's one about a perspective on divorce and separation. Niagara. This photo of a daughter smiling, son scowling, and that moment of frozen disconnection. My two youngest children stand apart, leaning on the fence before the falls. Water thunders in the background with the flow of 12,000 years, washing away time, crashing into a gorge, separating countries, draining one inland sea into another. I had collected them at dawn from their mother's house. It would be a 7-hour drive, too long for them to sit still in one place. It seemed merciful to let them sleep, allowing an awakening in a different horizon of farms and forests of upstate New York, red barns and furrowed fields awaiting the sprouting of spring, a forest of evergreen centuries guarding this entry into other worlds. We met and crossed some flatland, emerged into a worn-out city of dingy buildings, asphalt parking lots. Shuttle buses transported us to a park with trampled grass, and shops painted in carnival colors, high prices, low quality, betraying the marvelousness of the about to be seen. We were on the American side and wouldn't be able to cross the Peace Bridge. Written permission of both parents is a requirement of joint custody arrangements. Their mother wouldn't agree to it. Nonetheless, we still had a long walk ahead of us. A tourist trolley seemed to be the best solution. We boarded a packed tram, which also carried a good-natured drunk. He sang and laughed too loudly. Other passengers complained. The vehicle stopped to wait for police to arrive. and crashing to the pavement. They wordlessly manhandled him to cuff him and drag him away. The snapshot was shortly after that incident, each of them handling it as they would cope with life's other conflicts and the unnecessary violence of differences. She with a boundless optimism of denial and a smile. He with the sullenness of eyes that had seen too much and taught him to close up and keep his distance. And I'm glad that Jose mentioned altitude, because that's what I'm going to read now. Altitude. When you live at sea level, the atmosphere has a specific oxygen saturation. As you climb higher and gain altitude, there's a point where it is less dense. Your body responds to this change and you get short of breath. At some point, if you live for a while at a lofty peak, you adapt. Your breathing is fine until ultimately, if you keep climbing, the air gets too thin. However, once you've acclimated to this deficit, your body remembers. Returning to sea level requires no adjustment. But later, if you revisit a great height, you retain your adaptation. Your body preserves the newly gained ability. Having kids is like breathing at high altitude. Before them, life has its lower level where you breathe comfortably. Then you have children and the altitude changes. Adjustment is needed to maintain your breath. Instead of height above sea level and the oxygen density being the stressors, it is the factors of scarcity and time. When kids are little ones, you know just how far they can stray and the amount of time it will take you to get them. And you begin to gauge injury by the space of silence between wails. If a cry starts, the length of inhales is directly related to the degree of injury. Response speed correlates to the depth of gasps and the expansiveness of quiet. As they grow older, though, conditions return to sea level and your breathing begins to become more normal. Yet, when they're grown and leave home, once more distance is unsettling. The awareness of time required to retrieve them returns. Measuring the spaces between hearing their voices remains, and like breathing at high altitude, the adaptation resumes. You readjust again, hoping the oxygen just doesn't get too thin. And I'm going to close with a poem that's also about relationships. It's a villanelle, and it'll have a rhyme scheme and syllable count for you poetry nerds out there that you'll probably recognize. Glacial pace. The softest lands evolve at glacial pace. Rough mountains are ground slowly into hills, but tender valleys flow with light and grace. Ravines and canyons flaunt their open space, wild rivers carve, refusing to stand still. The softest lands evolve at glacial pace. Whitewater rapids rise and beg the chase. White summits echo challenges and thrills, but tender valleys flow with light and grace. Storms rage and etch rock face into lace. Velocity is part of nature's skill. The softest lands evolve at glacial pace. Seas surge, obliterate, and leave no trace. Whole continents submerge beneath their will. But tender valleys flow with light and grace. Both fast and slow emerge and interface. Sometimes creation's speed is what fulfills. But tender valleys flow with light and grace. The softest lands evolve at glacial pace. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Bob, and thank you, Beth. What an inspiring afternoon, and congrats to all the grads. It's a thrill to listen to your work. My name is Jennifer Mervin. I'm a faculty member here at Solstice, and it is my honor to introduce Jessamin McSwain. In response to being called a science fiction writer, Ursula K. Le Guin writes, "I don't think science fiction is a good name for it, but it's the name that we've got. It is different from other kinds of writing, I suppose, so it deserves a name of its own. But where I can get prickly and combative is if I'm just called a science fiction writer. I'm not. I'm a novelist and poet. Don't shove me into your damn pigeonhole where I don't fit, because I'm all over. My tentacles are coming out of the pigeonhole in all directions." Jessamin McSwain is also an author of many tentacles. To know Jess is to watch those tentacles wriggle and stretch, reach all over the place. Yes, she is a science fiction writer, and she is also a novelist, short story writer, romance author, Dungeons and Dragons master, teacher, beloved student, and beloved friend. To read Jess's writing is to witness an immersive and passionate imagination. Maybe Ursula Le Guin might be more accepting of a term such as builder of worlds. One can easily envision Jess standing over the universe of her novel in progress, Far from Venus, creating from thin air whole planets, spaceships, wormholes, religions, languages, powers, human beings, complicated, conflicted, and yearning, much as she stands over the table of her Dungeons and Dragons group as the dungeon master, or as she stands in front of her classroom. With each of these tentacles, she reaches out to her readers, her friends, her students with confidence and joy, her energy changing the room as we tune into her unique frequency. One is aware that as much as Jess is fully in this present tense world of ours, she is simultaneously in many others. Her head spins with invention, with the big questions of her genre. How was society made and destroyed? Why do people come to believe what they believe? How is power given and taken away? How does technology serve as a gift and also as a weapon? Why do we act the way we do? And how do our lives affect other people, our culture, our society, our world, our galaxy, our universe? What if we had the power to access other people's thoughts, emotions? What if we could move objects with our minds? Along with Katie, Jess was my very first Solstice mentee, and I couldn't have asked for a better, more representative writer of the spirit of this program. An eager learner, a voracious reader, a lover of invention and gaming and play, an open mind, a generous heart, and an experimenter of words and language of story. It is my honor to introduce my fellow Missourian, MFA graduate in fiction, Jessamin McSwain. May her tentacles never ever be contained. Okay, hi, I'm short, so you're gonna have to help me out a little here. Okay. As Jen told you guys, my name is Jessamin McSwain. I am a graduating fiction student, and my project is indeed science fiction. Before I begin, I'd like to thank a couple of people, specifically the mentors who helped make this thesis possible. I'd like to thank Steve Huff, who isn't here, for assisting and facilitating the big spill. I'd like to thank Jen Mervin for her visionary expertise as well as her pedagogical advice. I'd like to thank Laura Williams-McCaffrey for assisting in my critical thesis that I thought I definitely couldn't do. And I want to also thank Gina Chung. Where's she at? Gina, thank you for helping me get all my ducks in a row so to make this thesis what it is today. And then I have one final thank you to the man who helped me put all of this together so many years ago. I never thought that I could write a novel, and neither did my dad. And yet here we are today through my MFA, and I have written half a novel and he's written his novella. So thank you to my dad. Okay, so what you need to know is, as Addie said earlier, my novel is Far from Venus. It follows two converging storylines of Commander Daria Vidkov from Earth and Kata Mejia, an alien, but really just a human, dispersed elsewhere thousands of years ago. While Vidkov learns how to be both a good leader and embrace her identity as a queer woman, Kata's world on a moon 4 light years away from Earth falls into shambles. On her world, those blessed with the gift of the gods, the ability to read minds and skim thoughts, which is called the Moat, are considered faith property. Once their power is discovered, they join the faith, they join the edict, and that is the rest of their life. Kata didn't want that. Her parents didn't want that. And so she has spent her whole life hiding who she is. In the prologue of the novel, Kata is hunting down a traitor to the faith, and he blows some stuff up, and some people die. People she loves, people she cares about. Her Shuli, specifically, which is her brothers in arms. Only one survives. His name is Nephi, and he may or may not be kind of hot. She then spends the next couple of months working with her boss and Nephi to try to find this dastardly Raphael Badru character. Before this excerpt, she goes to a parlor where she talks with some rebellious people who debate faith and do it in secret, so that it is forbidden. She learns here from an old friend of hers, Yosef, that her father has been harboring the fugitive who killed her close friends. This excerpt takes place in the aftermath of that, as she is kind of falling apart, much like Grace in Beth's manuscript. Kata curled into her Shuli, into Nephi's arms. He held her until a quaking of her Moat ceased, until she gained a sense of herself. As clarity returned to her, so too did realization. In the dim light of the gas giant above, which seemed to make his fair hair glow, Kata gasped. She realized her tight grip on his tunic. She unfurled himself from his embrace. This was improper. Two Shulis should never... Her throat was dry, and her voice cracked. My apologies, Nephi. I don't know what came over me. Kata clambered to her feet. No, Kata, there's nothing wrong with being weak. His cheeks were tinged pink as he too stood. The parlor? Yosef? Your father? What was that? Were you using... She couldn't look at him. Please, Kata, what's going on? By the gods, she was stupid. She never should have brought Nephi along. There was too much risk. She'd been swept up in her excitement to work with him again, to continue her search for Raphael Badru, even when Master Amare, her grandfather, removed her from the case, that she'd made a mistake. A big mistake. Nephi knew. He was complicit in her deceit. He was in danger because of her. Unless, can I trust you?
What? Kata took a step back. Nefi took 2 steps forward. Kata, I'm your Shuli. We've known each other for years. Why would you think that the prayer hall feels like home to you? She took another step back. Nefi stood still. Of course it does. You don't know what it's like to be afraid of the faith, Nefi. To hide yourself from those around you, to walk day in and day out scared that one slip up would reveal yourself to your grandfather. She crossed her arms, wrapping herself in a tight embrace. She wanted Nefi's arms around her again. She wanted his support, but what if she couldn't bear the thought? Kata would need to do the rest of this alone. You wouldn't understand. You're right. I may not be able to use the Moat, but I know when someone uses it. I can sense it. You and Yosef battled for control. You won, didn't you? Her silence was her admission. Nefi glanced down a side road. They were obstructed from anyone who might be out late or patrolling the streets by the verdant boughs of persimmon trees and low-hanging lines burdened with clothing. Was he looking for backup? Or was he checking to see if they were still alone? Look, I want to find Raphael Badru and make him pay for what he did to Samira and Xerxes. I want to help you, Kata. He checked over his shoulder again, licking his dry lips. When he ran a hand through his hair and closed the distance between them with his palms forward, Kata froze. She was a fighter, a warrior. She was trained to see aggression. She was trained to fight back, to flee if necessary, but never had she frozen. Kata had a small knife in the sheath under her kaftan, standard issue. She wasn't sure if she could do it, if she could hurt him. Nefi, as timid as a trainer first approaching a megatherium, took her hands in his own. I can't help you if you don't let me, he said as he ran his thumbs in soothing circles across her skin like her mother used to do. Where was the indignant anger, the violence that her parents had warned her about? She'd expected hatred and repulsion and shame. Instead, she found tentative acceptance. Or was he in denial? Her Moat quivered. This was Nefi she was talking to. Of course, he accepted this treason as truth. He was as weak to her as she was to him. She inhaled, slow and deliberate. She counted to 4. And as she exhaled, she vanquished the fear trembling in her soul. Kata drew on what was left of her Moat and refined it into a focused fulcrum of energy. It was a technique to silently transfer ideas, to project thoughts to another. She'd seen it done by the masters when they didn't know she was watching, when she was a trainee in the edict left on guard duty. Still hand in hand, Kata said, I've never tried this before, but I will try for you, if you trust me. You gonna use your mind powers on me? He gave her a lopsided, cocky smirk. She wanted to smack him. She wanted to kiss him. Kata scoffed, rolling her eyes. I could easily knock your ass out and leave you here in this alley. He laughed. It was like he was challenging her to break the rules. I trust you. He laid her palms on his chest, and his hands hovered over her back. So close to him, her Moat flared. The compressed energy she was focusing on flickered unpredictably. His desire was affecting her ability to concentrate. When she ran her hand up his neck to his cheek, he shivered. He gasped inaudibly. His ears flushed pink. Kata smiled. This was a new kind of power, one she'd never possessed before. It flooded her with adrenaline, with endorphins and all kinds of hormones. Nefi's lips were the same color as his ears, and they were the perfect height to kiss. Her Moat boiled, the fulcrum of her energy quickly evaporating in his presence. She didn't know how to transfer an idea or thought to someone else, let alone memories. It was something Yosef never taught her. She doubted it was even something he knew he could do. The Arabs were gifted Moat users, but the masters were an entirely different beast. Kata, Kathy whispered. She pulled him closer, gently kissing his forehead, regardless of her desire to kiss elsewhere. Desire confused concentration, destroyed control. Like a bolt of lightning striking an acacia tree in the savannah, Kata released the remnants of her Moat. Her thoughts, memories, fears, ambitions, and desires flowed from her to him in an instant. They were disjointed, asynchronous, and wildly unpredictable. Her years spent training with Yosef alongside her mother and father. Her mother's mistreatment by Master Elmare, by her own flesh and blood. The constant arguing about Kata's future as if she were never in the room. The hidden papyrus scrolls of technological devices built by her father in secret. Her mother's outspoken hatred towards the scripture. Her last test with Yosef. The sweat that dripped down her forehead under the watchful gaze of her parents, of her grandfather, as she held her Moat as she might hold her breath. The Arif's disappointment as he tested Kata for the Moat and found nothing. The sharp, desperate shock she experienced when she found her father weeping over her mother's body. An accident, her grandfather said, at the Empyrean Tower. The distaste in his words as he spoke about his own kin, about his own daughter's death. The burden Kata carried, feeding and bathing her father in his depression. Years worth of comparisons made between Kata and her mother. The excitement she had on the first day of her Sosisi training, assassin training. The fear. The certainty she felt the first time she met Nefi. He would be her Shuli. His charming smile. The way they worked in tandem only hours after meeting. Every errant glance she caught from him. Samira's goading. Kata's denial. The sorrow she experienced upon losing Samira and Xerxes too. Her desire for Nefi to trust her. Her desire to trust him. The stab of pain brought on by her father's betrayal. Her desperation to be seen, to no longer be alone. Her Moat bled dry until at last Kata was empty. She had nothing left to give. Thank you.
Should tell Jill before I start that I picked the beginning of this before I reread your manuscript, and either I have a much better memory than I actually do usually, or there's some chime here, but you'll see what I mean. There's this quote from Anna Karenina that people often state as though it is truth. All happy families are alike. Each family is unhappy, and each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. When people say this, as I've just done, the crowd often nods and murmurs, yes, isn't that so? And I have often nodded too, but not so long ago, I started to think, is this true? Is every happy family alike? Is there just one way to be happy and many ways to be unhappy? Is there always a binary, happy families, unhappy families? Sometimes, yes, certainly, but always for everyone? I start the introduction this way because of Jill Sullivan Kane's work, which struck me so forcefully when I first read it. Her characters are mothers and daughters, siblings, wives, and also more than one identity at once, as we out here in the world tend to be. We are children. We are somebody's children. We are parents of children. And these identities mean what these identities mean can shift depending on who we are with and where we are in our lives, what we are remembering, and what happens to the people who make us children or parent. What secrets we learn or we keep. Our identities aren't fixed, and neither are the ways we understand these identities. In Jill's stories, these roles are sometimes further complicated by the cultural dynamics of children growing up in the US with parents who come from another country, another language, another web of understanding about what it means to be a parent, a child, a sibling, a spouse. The roles are additionally complicated by where her characters are, visiting Vietnam or in a Boston suburb, at a garage full of a marriage's forgotten clutter, a sister's home where that sister is dying. Reading Jill's work, I often think of the word liminality, a word very popular when I was in college, one I threw around frequently. At the time, I now realize I was in love with the idea, but didn't understand the lived experience, even my own experiences of it. Liminality is often spoke of as betweenness, a space that's neither here nor there, as if it isn't something on its own. The space between Vietnamese and American, between married and divorced, mother and daughter, happy and unhappy, an empty space. Jill's thesis is not about this kind of binary understanding, though her characters are sometimes troubled by binaries. It is about how you can be here and there simultaneously, in the past and the present, the US and Vietnam, the daughter of your mother and the mother for your mother, and the mother for your daughters who are reminding you more of yourself than you'd like them to. It is about how we can be happy and unhappy in ways individual and communal, spoken and unspoken simultaneously. While not always easy, it is a space where a lot of life is lived. I'm so looking forward to hearing her read, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Jill Sullivan Kane.
Hello. Thank you, Laura. I love Laura. She had the great challenge of being my first mentor, which was the steepest learning curve, but gave me the tools I needed to just move forward and keep developing. And I also want to say thank you to all the mentors, David, Gina, Jen, Sandra. Like, I've just learned so much, and I love all of you. It's funny what Laura was talking about, because it was part of my intro, so I don't know if it makes it lose some of the impact, but I'm a fiction writer. This is my last semester here at Solstice. And so last semester, I was thinking a lot about liminal spaces, about transitions, the in-between, people, family, trust, grief, all those things. And the following pieces of Flash are expressions of that reflection. The first one is called Bridge of Red Ants. This morning in bed, I detected a small red ant traveling along the seams where the wall meets the floor. I asked you if I should worry about there being more of them, and you told me with conviction not to worry. I asked again, do you really think there could only be one ant? Because in my experience, one leads to another. You looked at my eyes and seemed to ponder this. I got out of bed, down on my hands and knees. Were you watching me? I began trailing the ant in straight formation. It went under your chest of drawers. The bottom was open, clothes spilling out. Under the drawer swarmed a mass of red ants. They had discovered 2 breadcrumbs just a centimeter apart. They used their bodies to fill the space in between, creating a bridge and connecting the crumbs. I called you over to see it with your own eyes, but why are there breadcrumbs in our bedroom anyway? You wouldn't come. You didn't want to see. I put my pointer finger in the center of the ant bridge, watched the ants scatter out of formation after it collapsed. The second one. The second one is called Sandwich and the Bad Luck Meow. It's almost midnight, but the time on the oven reads 11 o'clock. It blinks and blinks. 11:00, 11:00. Must be a power outage, out of her control, she knows. Still, she flips the switch anyway. First quickly, then slowly. She flips it and flips it. She stops. She waits there with her finger on the switch, listening to her own breathing in the dark. Waiting for what? Some magic in between the actions. She walks to the cupboard and pulls out the bag of Wonder Bread to check on the mold. Yesterday, the slice on the top was still fuzzy with green and white spots. It's quite pretty, actually, she thinks as she twists the lengths of the excess plastic between her fingers and folds it back over the top of the bread. She knows this is bad luck and should throw it away. There's no saving it. Even if she scrapes away the visible mold, the roots have penetrated and all of it will taste moldy. She puts the bread back into its box anyway. She closes the doors of the cupboard and remembers the breaker box. She thinks of going down cellar, of descending those floating wooden steps, those sagging, rotting planks that lead to that unpainted stone wall where her husband dumped 3 carts full of sand to catch the April rain, that musty, earthy smelling dirt sand that a litter of kittens once mistook for their sandbox. She knew then and she knows now that it was bad luck to let in that stray meow. She walks across the cold kitchen linoleum to the cellar door and wiggles the rusty eyelatch hook from its rusty eye. Such a creepy old unfinished basement. The stone walls painted that pale shade of pink, like chalky baby aspirin crushed into a beady paste. The windows are splattered with wet soil, windows they never bothered to clean because why should they have? They were planning to finish the basement someday so that the kids had a space to make messes and eat their sloppy sandwiches without reproach. She stands there looking down the cellar a few moments before backing up. She leans against the interior side of the front door. The space between a foyer, the small size of a closet, is unlit with cold, tumbling air. She slides her back down the length of the door and sits, stretches her legs out until her toes reach the edge of the cellar door, and with a concerted effort, pushes it toward the jamb. It slowly rebounds. She pushes it harder. It bounces back harder. At this, she feels she could cry, but doesn't. She sits there wondering how many Wonder Bread sandwiches she had made over the past 6 years. Sandwiches sometimes she resented having to make, tasteless sandwiches, white bread on top, funny butter instead of meat in the middle, white bread on bottom. She smiles at the thought of it. She pictures the youngest, little hands reaching on tippy toes to touch the Wonder Bread. Wordlessly, because he had so few, he handed her the silly white bread. Her stomach was empty. She stands up in the dark foyer, lowers one foot down onto the top step, takes one sniff of the earthy, musty basement smell, and tries the switch at the top of the stairs. She flips it, but the lights still won't go on. She shoves her shoulder against the warped wooden door to get it closed enough to secure the hook into the eye. From the kitchen, she hears a small voice say, "Ma?" It's a power outage. Out of her control, she thinks. The lights will come on when the lights come on. What's going on? The second youngest asks. Again, the child is standing there holding the bad luck meow, its green eyes reflecting the moonlight coming in through the kitchen window. Are you hungry? The second youngest nods. Can I have a glass of milk? The cat jumps from the child's arms, walks to the foyer, rubs its body against the cellar door. The meow is always trying to get back into the basement, always hoping someone would leave it unlocked. She wonders if Meow goes there to remember the kittens. She wiggles the latch hook from the eye and the cat goes down. She walks to the refrigerator, takes out the milk, pours some in the small dish for the bad luck Meow too. What difference does it make if the lights are out at night? After the child finishes her milk, she tells her to go to bed. She leaves the basement door ajar for the bad luck Meow, the dish of milk at the top of the stairs. The next one is titled or called durian, which is a fruit. I don't know if you know it. We were in Bangkok in a cheap hotel I found in Boaters. It felt weird to be the one planning, even though I was technically an adult. The room was painted a spongy yellow melon, the color of a summer sunset. There were 2 ching-chgook lizards hanging out in the far left corner on the wall by the room's only window. It looked out into a small enclosed courtyard with a little garden. On our first and only day in Bangkok, we went to Ta Tien Market so that you could buy a durian, the so-called king of fruits. We walked up and down the busy maze-like aisles, boundaries defined by boxes overflowing with fruits and vegetables. You selected the biggest durian you could find, 3 kilos, had to be a foot long. I don't remember how many baht it cost, but I remember how you smiled at the price. You can't get like this in the States, you said. You looked pleased when I paid the vendor. We were only going to be in Thailand for the 1 day and night. It was a layover until Saigon. Knowing how you hated waste, I did wonder why you chose such a big durian. It didn't make sense. It made me happy to see you happy, though. You seemed to like so few things in those days. I offered to carry the durian back to the hotel because you seemed tired. We stopped many times to rest as we made our way through the crowds of people. You were breathing heavily, beads of sweat poured down your temples. It was before I learned about the strange rhythms of your heart. You insisted on carrying the durian yourself, shifted the weight to different sides when it got too heavy. That night, I fell asleep quickly. I was tired from the jet lag and the warm Singha beers I drank at dinner. I was at the age when you almost stopped saying things like, it's not nice for a girl to go around all the time, or a girl should not drink beer. I was sleeping soundly when I woke to the sound of rustling plastic and the buzzing of the fluorescent lights in the room. I saw your outline sitting up in the center of your twin bed. My myopic eyes, half open and stinging, couldn't see you well. Ma, what are you doing? I'm eating my durian. Go to sleep, you whispered. I'll never know how, but you found a way to peel through the thorny shell of the durian without a knife. You even need a knife to open a durian? How can I sleep with the lights on? Oh, the smell. You are an insomniac, always up late into the night. You only slept on couches in living rooms. You felt claustrophobic in bedrooms. You needed the noise of the television to fall asleep. At least there was no television in this room. Every night in high school, I woke to the sound of your Hong Kong videos. You put the volume at full blast. They were dubbed horribly from Chinese into Vietnamese. You never apologized about making me a victim of your insomnia, always just whispered, go to sleep. Why don't you go to sleep, I said. In the old days, you might have slapped my face for such a tone. I felt ashamed. My bravado melted quickly into fawning. Oh, we have an early flight, Ma. I worried it was too late. You were always good at ignoring. You didn't respond. I flopped down into my twin bed. I heard the tick, tick, tick sounds of the 2 ching-chgook lizards now clinging to the ceiling near the central light. You put the durian on top of the green plastic shopping bag, got out of bed, and turned the lights off. You waited until I was back asleep before you started up again with the durian. It was no surprise. In the morning, I saw the broken pieces of the thorny husk in the wastebasket. It was overflowing. You had eaten the whole thing and were sleeping soundly. It took a while to wake you. For a second, I felt scared. When it was time to leave, I turned to look back into the room. It was reflexive, I think. I saw the 2 ching-chgook lizards clinging to the wall by the courtyard window again. I could have sworn they chirped their goodbyes. At least this is what I pretend. At the airport gate, waiting for our flight to Saigon, there was a hollowness in my stomach. I was hungry. I wondered why you didn't offer me any durian the night before, like how you did when I was young with the lychees or rambutan. I refused them at first. They were small and sweet. All I noticed was the metallic smell of the can. Fresh is better, you said, but it's still good. You didn't give up until I tried them. They became my favorite fruit for a while. I sat there sitting on the plane. I sat there sitting next to you, not knowing all that I didn't know, thinking about the birthday card you sent me that year when I turned 25. You wrote, I hope you act like when you're 5. I wished then that I was 5 too, because though technically an adult, I wasn't ready to be the one planning anything. On the plane, I wanted to apologize for complaining about the durian. I didn't quite understand, and perhaps never would, how and why you devoured the whole thing. The last one is called Raspberry Lime Ricky. Once, when you weren't too tired from your night shift and Ma was at work at the store and everyone else was old enough to go to school, you took me down to Water Street to the Broadway Diner. You held my hand walking that fast army march of yours while I happily skipped to keep pace. I listened with focused attention as you pointed out your fascinations, like the old gas street lamps that were still there from when you were a kid in the 30s. I was bubbly and bouncing, floating in midair down the street like a tethered balloon, excited for my raspberry lime Ricky. Smell that, you said, inhaling the warm, yeasty aroma of the fresh bulkies as we passed Woodhouse Bakery. Yeast makes it rise. Carbon dioxide makes bubbles in the dough. Look at that, you said, pointing to the 5-gallon pickle buckets in the front window of Weintraub's Delicatessen. Saltwater cucumbers, poof, it's magic. You held onto my hand as you opened the door of the diner. We waited for Elaine, the waitress, to come seat us. Near the cash register, there was a hard plastic dispenser filled with colored toothpicks mounted on the edge of the counter. A small turn of the dial and they rolled out like prizes. I hoped that when it was time to leave, you'd let me roll one out just for fun, like you sometimes did. I looked up at you and you looked down at me. You squeezed my hand. I hoped for a green one that day. The waitress Elaine was familiar and seemed to like you, and maybe me too, because she always plopped 2 maraschino cherries, not one, into my raspberry lime Rickies. She led us to a small booth made for 2 and was already writing on her light green check pad before we sat down. 1 regular coffee and 1 raspberry lime Ricky with 1 cherry? I nodded even though I wanted 2. She winked at me and smiled. There'd be 2. While we waited, you were quiet. My legs were dangling off the floor. It was busy at the Broadway. It took Elaine a while to come back. I began kicking the back of the booth with my heels. You didn't even tell me to stop. When Elaine returned, she placed the raspberry lime Ricky in front of me. The red fruity liquid was at peak fizziness. The carbon dioxide seemed as enthusiastic as I was, frenetic under the pressure of the liquid. I laid my head down sideways onto my elbow and watched the bubbles rising to the surface. Magic, I was thinking. Sit up straight, you said. Stop kicking. I rose quickly. Stop kicking as told, but my right hand knocked into the fountain soda glass. It started to tilt and wobble. I looked at you. You looked at me. You thrust an arm across the table. You slapped your hand down onto the rim of the glass just in time to keep the raspberry lime Ricky from spilling. I glimpsed the back of your hand on the top of the glass. It covered my raspberry lime Ricky completely. I couldn't help remembering yesterday's spilled milk. I kept my head down as you took your hand off the glass. I sat still in my seat. Go ahead. It's all right. Take a sip. I put the straw to my lips and sipped. The carbonation was strong, made me sputter and cough, brought tears to my eyes. Too strong, you asked? I nodded. It can be like that sometimes. I nodded like I understood. Need a little help, you asked? I often did with the raspberry lime Ricky. It was sometimes too strong and too much. You took the glass and made a show of slurping the drink. My God, what's wrong? You took this glass and made a show of slurping the drink through the straw in one giant slurp. You finished with an exaggerated, I smiled. Then you slid the glass back so I could get the cherries, which is what I really wanted. I ate one and then slid the glass toward you. I like to share with you. You pretended to swallow it whole, and I pretended to believe you. On the way out, you let me roll the toothpicks just as I had hoped. It took 4 turns before a green came out. At the door, you held out the palm of your hand, and I took it, and it felt nice and warm. Thank you.
Solstice MFA, this is Ian Haley Pollock. I'm very disappointed not to be able to be with you tonight for the graduating student reading, but I'm very excited and honored to get to introduce Erik Armstrong for his specific reading tonight. Erik to me is so emblematic of many of the poets who have come through Solstice MFA. First and foremost in the rigor with which he approaches his work, and the thoughtfulness with which he approaches every aspect of the work, from creating images to where he breaks his line. But I think we Solstice poets are also able to balance that rigor with a sense of joyfulness, a joyfulness about the very process of writing poems that leads to a playfulness and to a willingness to experiment with form and to expand what we do as poets. But there's also a joyfulness, which I very much see in Erik, about being in community with other writers, about sitting in workshop and helping other writers become the best writers that they can be, the best poets that they can be. In Erik's work specifically, I really admire the tenderness with which he speaks about his family, and those who are closest to him. But he's also able to see beyond his family and to see other people's families and to see some of the injustice that happens in our world, and to see the hurt and pain that it caused. He's not walling himself off in his own compartment. And I think that's so important in the world in which we live right now. Similarly, I think he's a long-sighted poet, right? He sees the present moment and what is happening in our present moment, but he's also able to help us see the lowercase and uppercase historical moments that led us to our own present. Needless to say, this is a bittersweet moment. I know we keep our alumni close, but it's different when folks aren't continually coming to residency. So I'm going to miss Erik. I'm going to miss having him in workshop, but I'm excited about his manuscript. The fires burn all night now. I'm excited to see where it goes and where he continues to take the work and how he continues to grow as a poet. So sit back and let's listen to Erik Armstrong.
Before I get started, can we get another round of applause for all the wonderful writers who came up? You all did an amazing job. Before I read, just a couple of acknowledgements. First, thank you, Anya. I wouldn't be able to do this without you. Thank you, all the mentors and the faculty here. You have made this a wonderful experience for me, so clearly it is bittersweet. Okay, well, let's get in with this now. So I'm going to start with a poem that is the first poem in the manuscript, because I think it asks a question that the rest of the manuscript kind of works to answer. And before I start, just to give you a content warning, the first few poems do have allusions to violence, but they're not necessarily described vividly or gratuitously. So, but if it bothers you, I won't mind if you have to step out. Okay. Hopefully I'll take you on a ride. So first poem, a sonnet at the end of the world. The valley oak, the giant sequoia, the super bloom of wildflowers in a wet desert. They've all been written. And what's the point of pressing mountains into ink? What I mean to say is the gray wolf is killed 100 years after returning to the valley. And the fires rage every summer now. Red and orange sky brimstoned with smoke and falling ash. And today a child is dead who, surrounded by tanks and her family's bodies, recited the prayers she learned. What's the point in singing anyway? I'll never match the jays crying now in the spring's morning light, swooping over the fence between day and night. So the title of the next poem is the name of a heart condition that when your heart's beating, it can cause it to start beating really rapidly. Wolf Parkinson White's pattern. I want to lie and say it's nothing when my son says his heart hurts. Every day, children are born with pre-excitation syndromes. Their hearts alive with wild horses in the tiny corrals of their chests. I want to believe he's got an extra green fuse of life burning there against the dark hollow. Today, he found a wounded bee wandering the warm paving stones. And when he carried the bee tenderly to me, I trembled. The buzz of the bee, my son's heart on fire for its life. I want to believe it will survive all the fruitless beating of its wings. So the next two poems are something I was working with pretty much the whole 2 years here, which is a form that I kind of invented to mess with academic language, because I find that academic language isn't the only way to know things. There are lots of other ways to know things. So I'm kind of resisting that. For those that are not academics, it uses a works cited, which is how students cite their work in their academic essays. So when I read it, you'll hear me read a source and then I'll say a number. And that number acts like a section to the poem. So if you can think of it like that, I think it'll help you along while you're listening, since it's kind of a visual form. It's called a works cited. Blay Yaba, how the one drop rule became a tool of white supremacy. Lit Hub 2022, February 2001. 1. My mother is part Filipino, part unknown white male, a part of her she has searched the earth for. In each drop of her blood, maybe to know who to blame, maybe to find one small piece of herself that can survive here. CBC radio, Black teen shot in the head after knocking on the wrong door, doing exceptionally well. CBC radio, 19 April 2023. 2. It's a miracle he's doing so well after a bullet entered his face at point blank range and tore through his brain before heading into the neighborhood, all because he was a Black boy at a white door, lost and looking for directions, only to find a blaze of light and pain. He's doing so well, except his speech and his movement and his cognition, how his brain is trying to process what his heart knew about survival, and how in that moment, the bullet was many bullets, fired from the very beginning of all this, and it is passing through him still. Zepeda, Robert, and Susie Whitley. What would you do if you saw a Black father with a white child being harassed? ABC News, 25 January 2011. 3. I could offer him nothing except a beer and the chance to share some stories about America, like the one time my sister hurt herself at the playground. And when my white stepfather finally came, the park official pulled him inside and said, "Sir, she's a Black girl." Or the one time a friend confided how she had a white fiance, and she asked him how he would protect them, her and her Black son. And he believed that marriage would solve it, that her son would be his son, as if whiteness would become an umbrella and offer anyone his shade of protection. Like my father, whose work friend remarked, "This is your son?" And my father stepped forward and said yes. Orphanitas Alexandros, why mixed race Americans will not save the country. NPR, 8 March 2017. 4. They heard one line of MLK Jr. and forgot the rest. They imagined a bright city high up on some hill somewhere where everyone, white, Black, brown, red, yellow, purple, would be accepted. But don't forget what came first in line. Don't zoom in and hear a woman growl. Go back to your own country, to a brown boy who's never left that street. Don't look at the bodies beneath the river's surface, their hands supplicant, their mouths a drowned prayer. Don't look at all the shadows, despite the number of mestizos burning themselves alive for light. A work cited for Novotny Amy, what happens in your brain when you're in love? American Psychological Association, 10 February 2023. 1. I told the anesthesiologist that drugs are nice. The euphoria, of course, but also the warping of the world, how the window moves for the blue sun and barking dog of your heart. I swear I can understand how I can move through that window to you because we are made of the same star. Because seeing you is the deja vu of the heart or a trick of the mind returning to the same beat in time where I always wake to you after the brief dark. The Passionate Love Scale, The Anatomy of Love, 2025. 2. How we long to make this reasonable. Neat fences allotting parcels for the livestock of our bodies, barbed wire straining against the press of your bare shoulder on my mind. It sloped down to tender shadows. The lip of your hip bone, bare above the blanket, cannot be easily plotted on some graph. 15 or 500 questions are not enough to measure the tectonic pressure of our two continents' inexorable push into each other. The friction vibrates the mountains of my shoulders above you. The stampede thunders through a break in the line, tearing wild in the open valley. Lisitsa Eli, The Four Horsemen of Divorce, the Gottman Institute, 15 October 2025. 3. We've lost so much in this war. The bodies litter the roadways and the fires burn all night now. Black smoke makes blood of the sun, chokes out the starlight. I swear I can see you in the darkness of this bed. The covers pulled up over our heads. I promise we'll make it out of here come morning. Even though we both hear the horsemen, the jingle of the spurs, the spark of steel hooves striking flint earth, the creak of old leather, the nightmare's fiery snort, the rasp of the tightening noose. All right, this one I've read before, but I'm reading again. It's going to be forthcoming in the Watershed Review in the fall. And it's called Transmutation. I took your words inside me and knew they were magic. When you called me monkey, and I was. When you called me small, and I was. When you called me chink, and I was. When you called me fresh off the boat, and I was there drowning. When you called me black, and I was. Because compared to you, I was. Because being white made you unassailable in the walls of this small town. So I sharpened my tongue on the flint of your words as I swallowed them down into the bones of me. And I listened to each insult, each turn of phrase until I could turn them out, calling to you sweetly until you feel the shiv at your back. And each time I do, I am an alchemist, turning this ink into the sunset on turning leaves, a kiss on your sister's red lips, a curse on every next one like you. I am the undertaker, building this coffin around you and burying it line by line beneath the earth. I never was what you tried to make me. I am what I name myself. I am the new dictionary. And when I say chink, I mean your weakness, or gap where you're between your scales, where the arrow goes. And when I say small, I mean a stick of dynamite. And when I say brown skin, I mean all the sunlight you can stand and more. And when I say fresh off the boat, I mean I am bringing all the sea with me. Caring for my son's hair. Oma pulls and pulls hard until every single curl is smooth and taut against your skull and bound by a single band. She loves to see your face. thinks control is what you need to survive. And I pull your hair up into a bun because I remember you as a kid pretending to be Maui with all his mana, because I see islands in you we've lost, Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, more. And because I want it out of your eyes so that you are not caught unaware. Tonight, your mother weaves each strand of your hair carefully, one over another, starting at your crown, then falling over your ears, down your back, her fingers moving, sharp and deft and tight, until it's all one thick braid. She is teaching you how to care for yourself, how you can't keep anything you do not tend. Yard work in early autumn. This is the season for falling apart. The flowers all but dropped away with summer's warm days, and the leaves give their letting go lesson at the precise moment, sometimes releasing late, sometimes at the first whisper of frost. Look how they come down around us. Admire their final rattle. Don't sweep the leaves, love. Let them gather in the gutter, in the gap of the stone wall. Let them linger in the ringlets of your hair. And I'm going to end with a poem whose title is The Process for Making a Very Expensive Calligraphy Ink. Catching Smoke. Should you find yourself trapped in a dark room, light one oil lamp, then another, hundreds if you can. All the light you can make is all the light you'll have here. Keep the little flame lit at all costs. First, use oil you've collected around the house, then the sweat pulling on your forehead, the wound of fear reopening in the darkness, the black of your blood if necessary. Scrape the walls regularly, fingernails raw and hands sore, but steady. Gather the soot of this place and from your army of fires burning. Shape it into a black ball of night you carry with you away from here. When the door opens, run into the harsh sun, careless of your soot-covered body pulling all the eyes and light after you. And do what you please with all the smoke you caught. Sell it to the desperate men howling their desire in the streets. Save it to trade for food or water or sky, or like some primordial goddess, swallow it whole and watch every world drown and be born in the calligraphy of your footsteps. Thank you.
Beth, Bob, Jess, Jill, Eric, can we have one more round of applause?